But to her credit, Parvana did not seem to derive any satisfaction from hitting him, nor was she incapable of tenderness towards her stepchildren. There was the time she had sewn Pari a silver and green dress from a roll of fabric father had brought from Kabul. The times he had taught Abdullah with surprising patience how to crack 2 eggs simultaneously without breaking the yolks, and the times he had shown them how to twist and turn husk of corn into little dolls, the ways he had with her own sister when they were little. She showed them how to fashion dresses for the dolls out of little torn stripes of cloth. But these were gestures, Abdullah knew, acts of duty, drawn from a well far shallower than the ones he reached into for Iqbal. If one night their house caught fire, Abdullah knew without a doubt which child Parvana would grab rushing out. She would not think twice. In the end, it came down to a simple thing. They weren't her children, he and Pari. Most people loved their own. It could not be helped that he and his sister didn't belong to her. They were another woman's leftovers. He waited for Parvana to take the bread inside, then watched as she re-emerged from the hut, carrying Iqbal on one arm and a load of laundry under the other. He watched her amble in the direction of the stream, and waited until she was out of sight before he sneaked into the house, his soles throbbing each time they met the ground. Inside he sat down and slipped on his old plastic sandals, the only other footwear he owned. Abdullah knew it wasn't a sensible thing he had done, but when he knelt beside Pari, gently shook her awake from a nap, and produced the feather from behind his back like a magician, it was all worth it. Worth it for the way her face broke open with surprise first, then delight, for the way she stamped her cheeks with kisses, for how she cackled when he tickled her chin with the soft end of the feather. And suddenly, his feet didn't hurt at all. Father wiped his face with his sleeve once more. They took turns drinking from the water bag. When they were done, Father said, "You are tired, boy." "No," Abdullah said, though he was. He was exhausted, and his feet hurt. It was not easy crossing a desert in sandals. Father said, "Climb up." In the wagon, Abdullah sat behind Pari, his back against the wooden slat sides, the little knobs of his sister's spine pressing against his belly and chest bone. As father dragged them forward, Abdullah stared at the sky, the mountains, the rows upon rows of closely packed, rounded hills, soft in the distance. He watched his father's back as he pulled them, his head low, his feet kicking up little paws of red-brown sand. A caravan of Kuchi nomads passed them by, a dusty procession of jingling bells and groaning camels, and a woman with cold-rimmed eyes and hair the color of wheat smiled at Abdullah. Her hair reminded Abdullah of his mother's, and he ached for her all over again, for her gentleness, her inborn happiness, her bewilderment at people's cruelty. He remembered her hiccuping laughter and the timid way she sometimes tilted her head. His mother had been delicate both in stature and nature, a wispy, slim-waisted woman with a puff of hair always spilling from under her scarf. He used to wonder how such a frail little body could house so much joy, so much goodness. It couldn't. It spilled out of her, came pouring out her eyes. Father was different. Father had hardness in him. His eyes looked out on the same world as mother's had, and saw only indifference, endless toil. Father's world was unsparing. Nothing good came free, even love. You paid for all things, and if you were poor, suffering was your currency. Abdullah looked down at the scabby parting in his little sister's hair, at the narrow wrist hanging over the side of the wagon. And he knew that in their mother's dying, something of her had passed to Pari, something of her cheerful devotion, her guilelessness, her unabashed hopefulness. But he was the only person in the world who would never ever hurt him. Some days Abdullah felt he was the only true family of his. The day's color slowly dissolved into grey, and the distant mountain peaks became opaque silhouettes of crouching giants. Earlier in the day, they had passed by several villages, most of them far-flung and dusty, just like Sadbagh. Small square-shaped homes made of baked mud, sometimes raised into the side of a mountain, and sometimes not, ribbons of smoke rising from their roofs. Vast lines, women squatting by cooking fires. A few poplar trees, a few chickens, a handful of cows and goats, and always a mosque. The last village they passed sat adjacent to a poppy field where an old man walking the pots waved at them. He shouted something Abdullah could not hear. Father waved back. Pari said, "Abdullah? Yes? Do you think Suza is sad?" "I think he's fine. No one will hurt him." He's a big dog, buddy. He can defend himself. Suza was a big dog. Father said he must have been a fighting dog at one point because someone had severed his ears and his tail. Whether he could or would defend himself was another matter. When the stray first turned up in Sadbag, kids had hurled rocks at him, poked him with tree branches, and rusted bicycle wheel spokes. Suza never fought back. With time, the village kids grew tired of tormenting him and left him alone. Though Suza's demeanor was still cautious, suspicious, as if he had not forgotten their past unkindness towards him. He avoided everyone in Sadbag but Pari. It was for Pari that Suza lost all composure. His love for her was vast and unclouded. She was his universe. In the mornings, when he saw Pari stepping out of the house, Suza sprang up and his entire body shivered. The stump of his mutilated tail waggled wildly, and he tap danced like he was treading on hot coal. He pranced happy circles around her. All day the dog sat at Buddy, sniffing at her heels, and at night when they parted ways, he lay outside the door, forlorn, waiting for morning. Abdullah, yes, when I grow up, will I live with you? Abdullah was the orange sun dropping low, nuzzing the horizon. If you want, but you won't want to. Yes, I will. You'll want a house of your own. But we can be neighbors. Maybe. You won't live far. What if you get sick of me? She jabbed his side with her elbow. I wouldn't. Abdullah grinned to himself. All right, fine. You'll be close by. Yes. Until we are old. Very old. For always? Yes, for always. From the front of the wagon she turned to look at him. Do you promise, Abdullah? For always and always. Later, father hoisted Pari up on his back and Abdullah was in the rear, pulling the empty wagon. As they walked, he fell into a thoughtless trance. He was aware only of the rise and fall of his own knees, of the sweat bits trickling down from the edge of his skull cap, Pari's small feet bouncing against father's hip, aware only of the shadow of his father and sister lengthening on the grey desert floor, pulling away from him if he slowed down.